ladies and gentlemen, does anybody have any questions for either of the gentlemen on the stage? Oliver on my right, my furthermost right, is actually facilitating the deal room where it's working, yeah, where actual deals are being made currently. So if you have the money and if you have the plan, please speak to Oliver. So they're ready to take any questions that you have.
He could have just stood here. But of course, my question is to you. My name is Alima Tudimoni Kenny, and I am a woman and girls advocate, but I'm a big believer in local solutions to local problems, particularly, obviously, in West Africa. And I was just saying to somebody earlier before you spoke that it seems as if this is long overdue. This gathering is long overdue. But you said something that just sort of triggered my question to you. In this drive for AI and technology, because Africa has been leading this drive, I use a lot of technology in my work. And it's more or less like putting the middle finger as a diaspora to my country of birth, which was Sierra Leone. How can I, living in London, address the issues that we have in Sierra Leone? And the only way I thought I could do that is to incorporate technology, particularly new technology like AI, in transforming information that empowers the youth in using their voice for the common good. So you do the good sort of technology. What would you say, because there is this fear, right, with the likes of the AI-generated images of black people, and there is this reservation now that we're seeing. People were eager in wanting to incorporate this new technology in their work, but they're now reserved because, unfortunately, biases have kicked in. What would you say, because you have used AI in a more positive way, and from what you have just presented to us, which I like, it's something that is transformative, that we can really see that drive, sustained change throughout the continent. What would you say to erase this fear and sort of barrier that we are now having again on something that we could adapt as Africans, not having fear, not thinking, again, we're being discriminated, we're being left out. We really need to use this kind of technology. What would you say?
So the first bit is the baseline. So AI is trained on the internet data, information that's been contributed by society as a whole, but those who had access to the internet are predominantly in the global West, or the northern, the US, the Americans, Europeans. So that's where the data's come from. So the reason there's bias is we just haven't put the information into it. So that's the first problem, right? It draws, same with data around women in health. There's no data that's gone in, therefore you can't draw the necessary conclusions. So that's one bit. But aligned to that is then this interesting opportunity, which is AI is just a tool, and where resources are scarce, we use tools to make things more effective, right? The scavenger mindset is, you go out into a remote village and they'll keep these tractors running for 50, 60 years, way past, things are rusty, but it still works, right? It'll still work. You make things work, you fix it, you put a layer on top, you add a bit of something from here, you bring it together. If you take the same approach with AI, you say, okay, cool, we've got a base tool, we have an engine, yeah? Now I need my engine to do this, it was never designed for that, we've got to put a layer on it. And that's where you're starting to see the opportunity, I think, with AI. So you take the first pass. If it means you can now talk to someone in Sierra Leone in a localized way, initially, you still have to do some work. It's not going to do the work for you, but if you use the tool as a first case, let's do like 60% of the work for you, and then you still have to do stuff, but at least you've used it to a certain point. Let's not be scared of the fact that I was going to show only white people when we're talking about success, or only men when we're talking about deals. Like, so what? Change the picture. Copy and paste one of the internet, right? You can still do that. So it's the layer, the wrapper around it that I think is the opportunity. And then you don't have to build it, because it's quite expensive to build a base. There are a couple of examples out of Kenya and Nigeria and Ghana where I've seen they've built their own base model, but the data available to them is so small that it's still going to have the same bias problems. But it's the layer on top that's the opportunity.
Thank you very much. First of all, great country. Went there in 22. Enjoyed visiting Freetown. Shame that the tree has fallen now since I visited. But if you haven't been, do go. Great food, great shrimp. But I think to your point about the challenges that exist, as you say, these are not, unfortunately not new challenges. They exist. I'm originally from Namibia, and one thing that when I was there recently in June, I was very impressed. Went to visit a Namibian company called Paratus that are now the second largest reseller of Starlink and kind of low orbit satellites in Africa. Fully Namibian owned, and when you walk in there, it's like you could walk into a company here in London. They have data centers and all that stuff. But what really struck me is when I spoke to their chairman, he said, for them, the big thing is learn from the West, not to kind of shy away from the things there, but where we know, as you said, that being resilient and doing those things is also in adapting it to the local community. And one of the reasons they've been able to grow so much and across Africa is because they are using their counterparts in other countries, Africans, to say, let's do something. And all the challenges we talked about today with climate change, people talk about the Amazon, but the reality is the real heart, the lung of the world is in the Congo Basin. And it's things like that we need to input the data, we need to talk about more. That's why summits like this are so important. And this is just the second year of it, but we can already see the strength of people that have come together and that continue to shape the conversations.
Any more questions?
I've got a question for you then. So, show of hands, who is actively looking at funding projects or has the capacity to fund projects in the room? A shy hand, a couple of maybe hands, one back there. Who's got a project or something they're working on that is in need of funding? Okay. What are the rest of you doing?
Bystanders.
That's a genuine question, because we need more funders in the room, but we also need more projects, more opportunities, more things to be funded. It's a volume game, right? If we can have more ideas coming out of this room and saying, look, here is a thing, then this guy can go and get the money.
Yeah.
Good job, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. And just to kind of pick up on that is, so the idea of the dual room, I only met David about 6 weeks ago, it's a new thing we're trying to do, but it's about starting that conversation of, let's start the conversation that this shouldn't just be yes, these talks are all lovely, and I'm sure you enjoyed the presentation, but also about having those conversations with the people in the room. Whilst they're already there, why not let's sit down, start the conversation. We can always pick it up again, but it means that we're proactive about actually looking for the people that are looking for finance, but also people who have finance to say, this is what I'm interested in. Because as Sydney was explaining earlier, some of the challenges are that people aren't accessing the finance, not because there isn't financing, but because they don't know how to apply for the right financing.
Yeah, and I was just going to follow up with my question since nobody wants to ask. But you just touched on something that is very crucial in the work we do, social impacts. What I have discovered in the past just 2 years, there is a disconnect between investors or funders and the people that are doing or looking for funding. So I'm a believer of an approach called the customer discovery. You probably haven't heard of it. But it's looking at how we can pair the two partners, the person with the idea, or in my case, social impact, and an investor who's looking to invest. And we know there are incredible, ingenious ideas in Africa, and obviously we've now seen in the Caribbean. And so it's making sure we do what we call intentional approach, right? An investor, actually, if you do believe, because we talked about the imposter syndrome, but people don't realize what discrimination, colonization, and all these things have done to Black and ethnic minority folks, particularly those from Africa and the Caribbean. Even though we are so confident in what we're doing, there is almost like this sort of inherent approach to when we do business, oh, they're not going to believe me. They might ask me for my credit. They might think, who have I invested in, or what have I got saved, or what's my collateral, what capital do I bring to the market? So we are saying to investors, because we know there is the potential for growth and scaling up in these regions, and it's a huge market that could revolutionize and bring your money back tenfolds even, to say, go further, do that intentional approach. Of course they're not going to come because they probably haven't heard about you. We know there is a concerted effort. I wouldn't say what parts of the world, but there is a concerted effort to limit how we approach these things. So when investors or people with the money, the capital, can approach the Afro-Caribbean, the West Africa, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, wherever, make it a mission, like what you've just said on the One Hive. I think from just looking at it, I know you have done it deliberately by going to Kenya, Uganda, and making sure you provide the resources, you create the knowledge, you build on the skills that these individuals can then develop or use in their whatever they're doing. And I think this is what I want to see from here. Make it that conscious decision. Believe that the grassroots can do it. The SMEs have the potential to grow and help us grow, because we don't get that connection. The language spoken sometimes, it's very sort of exclusive, excluding, and it's really hard to break in. You know, you mentioned the VCs and the stuff. It's very difficult. We need the language that we all can understand that can bring us all in, particularly women, right? And people with disabilities. Thank you.
No, it's spot on. Just very quick comment. So we actually on Tuesday launch a non-profit arm of One Hive called One Hive at a Time. And we've called it the Delivery Impact Exchange. So earlier, Sydney was talking about the City of London, the Lord Mayor. In the UK, they are delivery companies are one of the biggest funders into non-profits and charities. So we've taken it on the mission to say, right, we're going to call you out on your piece, and we're going to match those looking for funding with those funding based on attributes about both sides. So smart matching algorithms say, look, if you want to fund young people, women in Ethiopia doing textiles, great. And there's an organization there, just use a smart matching algorithm, simple. But yeah, sorry, let's go to the room because I have some more questions.
So one comment and then a question. My comment was about imposter syndrome, that sometimes I think, at least for Caribbean people, that we create it for each other. We do not empower each other. We do not celebrate each other. We push each other down instead of raising our brothers and sisters up to make us believe that we truly can. My question is, sometimes in terms of AI and digital transformation, we speak in vague terms, so we all know it's expensive and we're all afraid to ask. So what does it cost for a company like yours to come to a little tiny island and enjoy a festival and do a consultancy for a student population that is literally only 600 children and their teachers? What does it cost to assess our machines, assess our tech ability, and advise us on how we can properly develop and properly digitalize education so that we can move forward? If not, you know, we're stuck in a rut like everybody else, but because our population is so small and we have access to funding, then surely this is not an insurmountable problem.
So maybe we could chat about how much specifically, but the approach has to be consultative. You've got to go in and understand the problems first before you devise a solution. If you go in with a solution, then you're looking for problems that your solution fits. It's got to be the other way. So you say, right, what? Exactly that. And that doesn't need to cost a big four consultancy coming in with a 100K budget. It can be done in the tens, if not less. So quite frankly, it doesn't actually have to take a lot. And if that's an opportunity, then definitely there are phenomenal individuals who are doing this pro bono or would be happy to pull in or whatever. And I think there is goodwill in this space. And you know, that whole be the change, the tech for good stuff, there are people in here that will come in at below your £1,000 a day rate for a consultant. Half of that's BS. Sorry, but like, you don't need it. So, but a good plan that's ground up, developed, co-designed with the right people. If you can get the people together, we'd love to come and help.
Hi there. So to respond to the question about what else are other people doing in the room. So I'm a lawyer, corporate lawyer, and I work with startups, SMEs primarily with their early stage fundraising and their growth. And with regards to companies that I've worked with and people in my network who are doing activity in West Africa or the Caribbean, funding is a huge issue. And a lot of them have been pursuing the venture capital route. Now, whilst I do, like, that's kind of my job, I do that, I don't think it's necessarily the right asset class for the type of work that we want to do in our regions. And I was wondering how much, twofold question, in terms of funding, because when we say that, it's quite broad. If you're in the know, you know there are different types of funding. And I mentioned one of them being venture capital. How much do you think we need to transform, how much is there like an education gap between companies and investors? And I guess maybe that's a question for you, Oliver, in terms of like what funding is available. And then how much do you think that we need to start championing maybe permanent capital, so something that's more long-term with, without the, you know, quick 5, 6, 7x returns to an LP? Like how much do we need to start championing that? Because what I'd end up doing is I tell my companies, you know, incorporated here, go to America, do the Delaware flip, and get your money there. But that can't be the answer because we're just taking it from one, you know, Western hub to another Western hub, and then the Africa Caribbean still loses out. I really think we need to be championing a completely different asset class, a different way of funding to enable the growth that we want to see.
That's a very important question. I think one of the conversations I'm having with different countries, in particular in Namibia, is also understanding what are the local funding opportunities, because I think sometimes people, unfortunately, because of the history and as you highlighted some of the conversations, people look at Africa with a Band-Aid lens and they kind of see, every time they think about Africa, they think about charity. And it's like, well, actually, and that's not to say that charity doesn't have a time and place. When, for example, in Jamaica now with the events happening there, absolutely, that's the time where we need to step up. That is not a trade-related issue. This is some time we need to give. But then a lot of these challenges are people need to be having the conversation and the training and access to it of how do you empower people to understand how do you access your local financing, what are some of the systems that might not be your way of traditionally doing business, having your accounts, etc. In Africa, a lot of businesses use a lot of cash, and obviously if you go to the banking institutions, they then challenge some of that. It's like, okay, but where's this money coming from? But it's if you have those records and accounts, then that it shows that where the money has come from, and people often don't realize that they actually have all the tools already available. They just don't know how to package and approach that together.
Just one thing to add very briefly on that. I think that's spot on. There are ways. An example that China did quite well, actually, that we can look at, that might be a taboo, but look at some of the good stuff. When Jaguar Land Rover wanted to make a market entry into China, they had to do it with a local company. So what you say is, yes, if you want to come in, great. What you don't want is to fund in the US or Delaware or US, like a company is then going to do some valuable stuff in West Coast Africa or the Caribbean. You want to say, well, like, how do you say, okay, cool. We are, as a country, going to invest in this venture initiative, but we're going to bring one of our companies to co-own the IP or co-design it or be the distributing partner, whatever it needs to be. But then at least you've kept some form of sovereign wealth generation through the capital and the growth. Or we'll say, like, we want equity, or we are, the sovereign is going to invest in this venture that's going to happen in the country. And then that needs a different approach, but then you can all of a sudden grow value. Some of the exits that people are seeing in the billions, like a lot of countries would hugely value that, would like 10x some of their output. So think different. Oh, can we do one more? Yes.
Sorry. What I was just asking was more UK-based. If any individuals who were looking at a grant application and they wanted to do that maybe through the mayor's office, would it be possible for yourselves to give any advice or support in how they go about that kind of an application, or is that maybe a bit low down?
I mean, so from our side, so what we've done is less on the grants, but it's helping charities raise capital with a clear plan. So people will invest in projects, right? Mayor will invest in things that align to KPIs. It's a whole, got to write it in a particular way. If you can take the project, take the funder, and then look at, okay, let's say it's grant funding, they're going to want to see certain things. And if you've got a clear plan and you can articulate it in a very eloquent way and it's done to that, then it's that. But the reality is grant funding is hard. It's like a 1 in 10 success rate. It's not, you know, they talk about a lot of funding being deployed, but it's not an easy thing to get either. And so I think, you know, if that's the right route, then yeah, I'm happy to chat about and share some of the experience we've had as well with that.
Okay. And one last quick question. For a charity that I know about, it's got charitable status on the island of Montserrat. It's Helping Hands for Glendon. If it was to have charitable status in the UK as well, is that an area that you can offer lens expertise?
I might revert to our solicitor friend over here, potentially. Yeah, the legal side, yeah. But no, there are people that will be able to advise, and those who do a lot of stuff pro bono as well. But I think you're going to be going to like legal or accountancy firms who are well versed in the non-profit space. If anyone's in that space.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
But yeah.
Thank you.